Recording in progress.
We are live, Your Honor.
Good evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record show that all members of the City Council are present this evening, with the exception of Councilmember Freitas. The first item on the agenda is a proclamation declaring March as Meals Month. And this is proclamation number 1863, the 20th annual March for Meals Month. Whereas on March 22nd, 1972, President Richard Nixon signed into law a measure that amended the Older Americans Act of 1965 and established a national nutrition program for seniors 60 years and older. And whereas Meals on Wheels America established the March for Meals campaign in March of 2002 to recognize the historic month, the importance of the Older Americans Act nutrition programs, and raise awareness about senior hunger. And whereas the 2022 observance of March for Meals celebrates 20 years of providing an opportunity to support Meals on Wheels programs that deliver vital and critical services by donating, volunteering, and raising awareness about senior hunger and isolation. And whereas Life Elder Care, a program providing home-delivered meals, has served our Newark community admirably for more than 47 years, and whereas Volunteers for Life Elder Care are the backbone of the program, and they not only deliver nutritious meals to seniors and individuals with disabilities who are at significant risk of hunger and isolation, but also caring, concern, and attention to their welfare. And whereas Life Elder Care programs in Alameda County provide a powerful socialization opportunity for millions of seniors to help combat loneliness and isolation. And now, therefore, I, Alan L. Nagy, Mayor of the City of Newark, on behalf of the Newark City Council, do hereby proclaim March 2022 as the 20th annual March for Meals Month in Newark, and urge every citizen to take this month to honor Meals on Wheels of Alameda County and its programs, the seniors they serve, and the volunteers who care for them. And I understand that Deepa is like to say a few words. He's through Zoom.
Good evening, Mayor Nagy and New York City Council members. Thank you so much for inviting me here tonight to accept this proclamation. We are so very grateful for your longtime support of Life Elder Care's Meals on Wheels program. As you well know, Meals on Wheels is a critical institution which has provided nourishment in body, mind, and spirit for some of the most vulnerable and isolated seniors in our community since 1975. Last year, we delivered nearly 150,000 meals to 834 elders. And each of those seniors received a daily well check, which has literally saved the lives of clients who had fallen or had another emergency, and they were found by their volunteer when they came to deliver a meal. We deeply appreciate your partnership and acknowledgement of the value of Meals on Wheels through this proclamation. Thank you again for inviting me, and I'm happy. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to point out that one of our council members, Vice Mayor Hannon, is a volunteer driver for Meals on Wheels. And Mike, we certainly appreciate your service to the seniors and the route that you delivered to. And I believe you do it, what, twice a week or 3 times a week?
Mayor, I have the pleasure of delivering meals once a week to residents of Union City.
Oh, very nice. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Diva.
Thank you so very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next item is introduction of new employees. I ask that the Associate Planner, Ballet Bat, and Community Preservation Manager, Wilcomb, please join me at the front of the podium there. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Let's start with Joseph. Hi, Joseph. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Good, good. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joseph Ballet-Bat, and he's the new Associate Planner for the City of Newark on the Planning Division. Joseph was born and raised in the Bay Area. He received his bachelor's degree in urban studies and planning from San Francisco State University. His previous role was the assistant planner for the town of Woodside, where he worked on a variety of development projects and code amendments. Joseph is very passionate about planning and strives to enhance the quality of life for communities and is looking forward to working with the people of Newark. During his free time, Joseph enjoys spending quality time outdoors and cooking new recipes with his wife. Most recently, he has taken interest in a new hobby, golf. Well, congratulations, Joseph. Welcome to Newark, and look for a long card. And I'd next like to introduce Steve Wilcomb. Steve comes to the city of Newark as a code enforcement veteran, serving at various levels, including investigator, supervisor, and manager in the areas of finance, law enforcement, and community development. His experience as a supervisor and manager spans over 20 years throughout California. This experience includes working for the communities of Oakland and Whittier. After working for the city of Norwalk in community development as a supervisor over code compliance for over 7 years, the city of San Bernardino hired him as the code enforcement division manager in 2012. In 2013, the city of El Monte recruited him to bring him as the neighborhood services manager in charge of code enforcement and animal control. In 2016, the city of Reading brought him on board as the code enforcement supervisor. Mr. Wilcomb guided the city of Reading code enforcement staff during a period of growth when the staffing grew from 1 to 7 staff members. Steve earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in public administration from Ashford University and an Associate of Arts degree from East Los Angeles College. He also attended Rio Hondo College and earned a code enforcement training certificate and is currently a certified code enforcement officer with the California Association of Code Enforcement Officers. Steve resides in the city of Fremont with his wife, Annabelle, and they both enjoy the wonderful sights and activities of the Bay Area. So again, I want to welcome Steve to the city of Newark and look for a long association with you. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. 2 newest employees. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public comment on any items not listed on the agenda. For Zoom attendees, please use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to speak. First of all, would anyone in the audience like to speak? Okay, this is public comment. Nobody? City Clerk Harrington, are there any requests to speak online?
Oh, yes, we have one, Your Honor.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Matthew. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Matthew Jew. My address is 39997 Cedar Boulevard. I serve as a director on the board for Murrieta Homeowners Association, and we have 324 units across the street from the proposed affordable housing apartments project on Cedar Boulevard at the Marriott Town Place suite site. There's been some concern raised by our residents regarding the council's approval of the project in January without the majority of our residents knowing about the decision that had already been made. So we received an invitation to an online meeting with Allied Housing and Abode Services. But this meeting happened after the project had already been approved. So we invited our residents to be heard by the council by inviting them to attend the city council meetings to voice their concerns during public comments. At the last meeting, nobody spoke up, but I just wanted to mention that there is some opposition. There's an online petition that has been signed by over 2,600 people. The questions that I have that I'd like to be able to report back to our residents is how many residents were contacted regarding this project ahead of its being approved, within what radius and what's the minimum radius that is required. So yes, we would like your staff to let our board know so that we can at least share that information with our residents. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Matthew, before you go away, let
Yes.
me ask you that you send us an email or a letter stating the information that you require, that you request, and we'll see if staff can get that to you. I don't think staff is ready to answer the discussions tonight.
We can certainly have a discussion, but it'd be very limited in light of the Brown Act.
Okay.
I would
Yeah,
endorse
we
the
are
mayor's
limited
suggestion.
in responses we can make due to the Brown Act. So if you'd get those that request to us in writing, we could see that you get contacted with the answers to them. Okay, thank you. Mhm. Okay, Councilmember Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick follow-up with staff. The public meeting that was held, I know we said at some point it was going to be uploaded up onto our webpage and maybe a couple others. Do we know if that's happened yet so people can go back and review some of that information?
Yes, thank you. Stephen Turner, Community Development Director. The community meeting on March 9th was not recorded. However, we do have the slides, and those are posted up on the project webpage, certainly at the Allied Housing project site. I will also confirm the intent is to have them up on our project page on our city website as well, so I'll make sure that that happens. That's an opportunity to hear about the information at the March 9th meeting. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
believe we had a number, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I believe we had a number of frequently asked questions, and some of that stuff might be in there as well. Is that correct?
Yes, there's the project information along with the list of frequently asked questions is available at that website.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other speakers for public comment? Ms. Harrington?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll go to the next item, is consent calendar. And the consent calendar consists of items D1 through D8. Let me first ask, are there any items that staff would like pulled from the consent calendar? Okay. Are there any items the public would like pulled from the consent calendar? This is items D1 through D8. Okay. City Clerk Harrington, you check the Zoom attendees?
None, Your Honor.
None? Okay. So are there any items that council would like pulled from the consent calendar? No, thank you. No, okay. So the consent calendars consist of the following items. Item D1 is approval of audited demands. Item D2 is approval of the March 10, 2022 special and regular meeting minutes. Item D3 is adopt an ordinance adding Chapter 7.24 Fireworks Social Host Ordinance to the Newark Municipal Code to increase penalties and enforcement authority related to illegal use of fireworks. Item D4 is adopt a resolution confirming the continued existence of a local emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Item D5 is adopt a resolution finding that there is a proclaimed state of emergency, finding that meeting in person would present imminent risks to the health and safety of attendees as a result of the state of emergency, and authorizing the continued remote teleconference meetings of the legislative bodies of the City of Newark for the 30-day period beginning March 24th pursuant to AB 361. Item D6 is adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the First Amendment to the Contractual Services Agreement with Four Leaf Incorporated to provide temporary professional planning services. Item D7 is a motion to accept a recommendation from the Community Development Advisory Committee for allocation of anticipated Community Development Block Grant Jurisdiction Improvement Project funds for fiscal year 2022-2023. And item D8, mid-year budget review and adopt a resolution approving an amendment of the 2020-2022 biennial budget and capital improvement plans for fiscal year 2022. So would someone like to move the items be approved as recommended by staff, with any items approved by resolution or ordinance being numbered consecutively, and that the reading of the title suffice for purposes of introduction or adoption of the ordinance? Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay. We'll get it here in a second. I do not see the start voting button on here. Oh, geez. All right, please vote. Okay. Well, let's do this again. Please vote. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Let's see if we get 2 out of 3. Okay.
Didn't like the count on that first one.
Okay. Motion passes 4 ayes and 1 absent. Councilmember Freitas absent.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newark adding Chapter 7.24 fireworks to the Newark Municipal Code to increase penalties related to illegal fireworks.
Okay. And item E is public hearings. There are no public hearings. It's the other business, item F. And the next item is a staff report, please, Mr. Benoon.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, and members of the council. Item F1 is an informational report provided primarily by our Economic Development Manager, Ms. Ann Stedler, as well as Mr. Michael Cohen of Spectrum Small Business Services. The last time Ms. Stedler provided such a report was back in January of 2021. The staff report for tonight's presentation consists of 2 primary sections. First, a look back at the city's economic efforts to revitalize and sustain our local economy in the face of a pandemic. And second, a report out on the existing and potential future activities that the city can undertake to further support our local businesses. Before I pass it over to Ms. Stedler, I'd like to point out that we at the staff level are particularly proud of all of the work the city has done to combat the pandemic. Our efforts range from adopting a local eviction moratorium, to providing nearly $2 million in small business grants, and to adopting the City of Newark ARPA Recovery Plan, which provides further technical assistance for local businesses. I'd also like to thank and publicly acknowledge our Economic Development Manager, Ms. Stedler, for her zealous advocacy of small businesses, as well as the level of thoughtfulness she's shown for tonight's presentation. So, Ms. Stedler, you have the floor.
Thank you. I am pleased to be here with Mr. Michael Cohen of Spectrum Small Business Services, and it is our honor, Mr. Mayor and council members, to present this updated report. There are 3 big ideas in this report. One is that Newark remains supported by a very strong Bay Area economy, which is a boon to the large businesses, a very important factor in our economy. Secondly, that the city's services have been expanded by grant funds, and that has helped us serve the small businesses better than we ever anticipated when the pandemic started. And finally, we said in 2021, when we did our first report to council, that we're all in this together. And although that's still true today, we have to add that we're stronger and more connected due to the resiliency of our businesses, the impact of services that we're describing tonight, and in the face of both of those, stronger relationships between the city and the business owners. There we go. We call this technical difficulties. Oh, that's good. Okay. The report covers 3 primary areas: large businesses, and we're thinking of large business in terms of those having employees numbering 100 or more. Mid-sized manufacturers and the suppliers that support them. That's a category of business that is typically under 100 employees for purposes of tonight's report. And lastly, small businesses, typically your mom and pop or sole proprietor type businesses. These items are conveyed to you in the staff report and in the attachment to the staff report. The attachment gives us an opportunity to do some specialized formatting, and it makes it much easier to read. In addition, we'll have two short comments at the end of the presentation on specialized business sectors, our hotels and retail property owners. In terms of large businesses, we've had an exceptionally strong leasing record among large businesses in 2021. The vacancy rates show this in hard numbers. Manufacturing vacancy is under 5%, R&D under 3%, and we know that tenants are still looking. If we drill down on this, it's even more impressive because during the period that those vacancy rates are considering, Newark has absorbed and brought online nearly 1 million square feet of new project area. At this point in time, only 16% of that new area is still vacant. That's a total of 160,000 square feet out of the 1 million new square feet. And to emphasize this even further, in July of 2021, 6 new leases were signed. That's an extraordinary number of leases for a single month during a pandemic where we thought that large business growth might be undermined. In 2022, we expect that strong leasing interest will continue. And we, in conjunction with the private market, are motivated to support that because that's the source of our additional tax revenue, additional new jobs, and in fact, a record in the marketplace where brokers and developers know that Newark is business friendly and will help get through the permitting process is the best marketing we can do. And in light of that, I want to particularly commend my colleagues in all the permitting functions, public works, planning, and finance that support the development of new businesses in Newark. Turning now to mid-size and small businesses, we'll refocus our attention. City Manager Benoon mentioned the array of services that we had adopted in 2020. We'll go over those and also remember that Council at its meeting of November 18th made additional supports for businesses. At November 18th, 2021, Spectrum Small Business Services was approved for 2 contracts. One was the Exceptional COVID-19 Grant Program, which sought to support businesses that were typically unsupported by earlier grant programs. And in addition, Council renewed Spectrum's contract with the city to continue to do advising and workshops with small businesses. Tonight, we want you to know that we expect to enlarge that array of services during the course of 2022. And I want to talk next about expanded services to mid-sized businesses. Mid-sized manufacturers are particularly important economically. And yet, historically, because of our small size and the absence of an economic development function, we haven't reached out to this sector. In 2022, there are 2 opportunities to bring value to this business category. One is provided to us through Spectrum Small Business Services again, and one through our partner economic development agency, the East Bay Economic Development Alliance. Spectrum Small Business Services has enlarged its portfolio of consultants to add Mr. Tom Fulcher, himself an experienced professional. Mr. Fulcher has a specialization in sourcing capital for business expansion and identifying international markets where businesses can increase sales. Our expectation is to introduce Mr. Fulcher to businesses that we think might best be benefited by his services and explore the opportunities for him to help Newark mid-sized businesses. Let's see if I can. There it is. The second of the services we expect to bring to our mid-sized manufacturers is from the East Bay Economic Development Alliance again. And that is made possible by a federal CARES grant. We joined East Bay EDA in applying for that grant, and it's been awarded to us for the purposes of providing technical assistance to the mid-sized manufacturers. That means helping those manufacturers refine their competitive edge. That kind of money and support comes primarily from the U.S. Department of Commerce, and it's meant to strengthen America's competitiveness. The outreach for this program will begin in March 2022, which is in the next week. We'll have our first event. This slide focuses in again on the small business support that City Manager Benoon mentioned at the beginning of this item. These items shown here are the early efforts that the City Council and staff made to welcome small businesses and help them get through the threats of the pandemic. This section of our report will focus primarily on small businesses and the work that we've done not only in 2020 but afterwards up to the current day and our projection for work through 2022. The most intense of these efforts was the workshop and one-on-one business advising, which required interaction with the businesses and actually helping them make progress on items that were of concern to them. For that reason, I'm going to turn this section of the report over to Michael Cohen, who did most of the work crafting the program and developing it, and all of the interaction consulting with businesses and developing the workshops. There are in this section a few slides where we've brought to you the quotes that we heard small businesses say in the field, what they told us over the phone, what they told us in person. When we come to those slides, we've elected not to read them out loud to you. Instead, we'll let those owners speak for themselves as the most respectful way we could bring their input to this audience tonight. Michael.
Well, thank you. I just want to say it really is an honor to be here, and I've been so happy to be a part of your business ecosystem, and especially working with somebody like Ann Stedler, who is one of a kind, as you know. I began this journey with the City of Newark in October of 2020. Our overarching goal was to better understand the small business community. This included a lot more than just identifying businesses from a license list. We wanted to know who the owners really were and what kinds of issues they were actually facing. So our database began using the applicants for the October 2020 Newark CARES grants. We were fortunately able to add a questionnaire to the grant application, which included questions about need assessments as well as their financial hardship. Alameda County also had a CARES grant, which helped us to get more data about more businesses into our database. So by the summer of 2021, through personal outreach, workshops, and one-on-one advising, we had already assembled a very comprehensive profile of the small business ecosystem that the city had never previously had. So that's what enabled us to create the criteria for the exceptional COVID grant program that we affectionately named ECGP, and that was executed in December of 2021 and January of 2022, just a few months ago. During 2021, I was lucky enough to have personal contact with actually 162 business owners in the community, and that entailed 122 hours of advisory work, which is in addition to the financial workshops that we provided. We all felt the business owners' intense pressure from the pandemic and their palpable fear of losing the businesses that they had worked so hard to establish. Many of these people had never experienced having any debt with regard to their business, let alone having unpaid rent that was becoming completely unmanageable. They all needed funds, and they needed those funds as soon as they could get them. Based on these communications, we developed workshops that would help to alleviate some of the owners' concerns and provide them with much-needed financial education. The first one was the Financial Resiliency 4-hour workshop, and that became a requirement in order for them to be funded through the Exceptional COVID Grant Program. The other one was a debt recovery workshop, and that included a methodology for calculating how to pay their back rent and at what rate to pay it so that their businesses would be able to survive. We had 167 business owners that took part, and that included 105 of the grant applicants. The sessions were provided in English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Vietnamese. These are some of the quotes with regard to participants that took our workshops. And mind you, these people covered a wide spectrum, from being completely unfamiliar with financial reporting all the way to someone who was actually a college graduate business major. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and it reaffirmed that what we were providing was the kind of information that these business owners needed the most. As we designed the Exceptional Grant Program in the summer of 2021, these were the kind of statements that we received from the community small business owners. I have to tell you, it was really heartbreaking at times and gut-wrenching at others. I don't think we really understood how grave the situation was until we found ourselves right in the heart of it. As great as the need for the grant was, it was really a heavy lift for us to make sure that everyone who should apply actually did. There were some business owners who needed a great deal of assistance with their applications, even though we designed the questions to assess their need with minimal documentation. We're elated that the funding did in fact go to the most vulnerable business owners because of the grant criteria that we had created that led us to this outcome. I can honestly say every grant went to a business that had an exceptional COVID-related loss. I am personally so grateful to the city for allocating enough funds to allow us to succeed in this endeavor. As you can see, we had 146 applicants, of which 110 were actually eligible. We were able to grant 82 of those applications with an average grant award of $17,611, which totaled to $1.44 million, so we had a little change left over. We collected a lot of data during this application process, and this is just a very small sample of the results that we got. As you can see, of the 82 recipients, the vast majority of them were shut down involuntarily by the state for at least 6 months. In most cases, it was more like 9 months. 89% of them had lost more than 50% of their revenue in comparing 2020 to the previous non-pandemic year of 2019. 48% of them owed back rent, and that average amount was over $16,000. But keep in mind that 86% of them reported that they had paid some rent from personal funds. So if they hadn't dug into their own savings to pay the rent, this would have been even more dramatic. And of course, in a perfect world, a survivable business would hopefully not be in a situation where the owner has to pay the rent out of their own pocket. But that was the case during the pandemic. So to say that the response from the community was one of gratitude would be an understatement. A lot of them were actually surprised. Some of the smallest businesses oftentimes feel very isolated and they feel unappreciated. So it was special for them to be recognized at a time of unprecedented crisis. You know, it really doesn't matter what you tell people, seeing is believing. We are far from finished working with the Newark small business ecosystem, as the pandemic is still with us, and the effects are going to be far-reaching even if and when the pandemic actually ends, and we certainly hope that it will. We've already had 19 businesses that we had worked with ultimately close for good, and many of the smallest proprietors are still in jeopardy of closure. Moving forward in 2022, we're creating new workshops aimed at assisting these businesses with issues that they helped us to identify that they needed help with, such as how to use spreadsheets and having direct access to more resources online. The advisory work will also continue. Plus, we are relying on referrals to other area resources to help us to provide almost anything that a business is going to need. And of course, this is always at no personal cost to them. So I'm going to hand it back over to Ann, and she's going to talk about 2 more short segments as we conclude our report.
The hotels, as you know, were hit tremendously hard by the pandemic, and for a long time they've been unable to achieve any kind of substantial recovery. At this point in time, we believe that they're at approximately 60 to 70% occupancy, which is significant improvement, and room rates are still lagging because of that lack of demand. This, of course, is important to us because it's a source of our transient occupancy tax. So at this point, even though business travel is still below the 2019 levels, we believe we've made enough progress that we can project recovery and we can identify whether there are initiatives that we could undertake as a city to be helpful to the hotel sector. This interest on our part is also encouraged by the fact that there's grant funding available for the hospitality industry, and we hope we can use some of that resource to support our hotels. Retail property businesses have also been greatly affected by the pandemic, and of course retail was in a state of dramatic change over the last 20 years in any case. So as we experience retail and the shopping centers that we currently have in Newark, we realize that there are large vacancies, particularly at the corner of Newark and Jarvis, and that's a concern to us. It, on one hand, reflects the retail market, but at a very personal and community level, these centers are amenities for us, and to some extent, they help us create an identity for Newark. So we do want to tackle this issue. Legal research can be a help to us in this. In addition to the market considerations that affect retail, there are legal documents on almost every large shopping center that curtail what a property owner can do, either to re-tenant or to make significant changes in the property. In addition, those legal documents indicate how many other property owners need to give their approval to a proposal for re-tenanting or change to a shopping center. We believe that it's due diligence on our part to understand what those legal constraints are. They're publicly available records. We can do the homework and understand better what an individual property owner is up against as they try to re-tenant. We would couple our research with a regulatory review of our own understanding what it is that Newark requires, what is our approval path, what is the time and cost that a property owner would face if they were to undertake re-tenanting, or changes that might make re-tenanting attractive to a prospective tenant. And in conclusion, I want to point out the three main themes, again, of our presentation tonight. That we're still dealing with an amazing, thriving economy that means expansion for businesses here in Newark and probably new tenants as well. That our mid-sized businesses will be buoyed by advising and technical assistance for the first time, and that our small businesses will continue to be supported as they survive what we hope will be a conclusion this year of our pandemic. For us, Michael and me and the team that we work with, this means that we have proactively leveraged and will continue to leverage market forces, and that we will continue to build city-business relationships to improve capacity of our small businesses and access to resources by businesses across the sectors. This concludes our report, and we welcome your questions and your comments.
I think I'll just start with a comment, and that's thank you, Ms. Stedler, and Mr. Cohen for the report. It certainly underlies the significance of how important it is to support business in this community, because it's just, so much of our revenues depend on the business that's here and the jobs that they offer. And it's this proactive approach that the city has taken, I think, that has tremendously helped these organizations to survive. I won't say thrive yet, but at least to survive. And, the next step is the thriving part. So again, thank you. So other council members' comments? Councilmember Kaiser?
Thank you, Your Honor. So I wanted to just mention that as I do my shopping here in Newark, my theme, Shop Newark, I have been thanked many times by several business owners. And so we owe that to the great work that you guys have done, because if it hadn't been for that grant money, their doors would have been closed, and it's the hardest thing to lose your livelihood, something that you've worked for many years, and then all of a sudden it's gone. You can go into depression and never come out of it, and feel like a failure. And with just a little bit of help that we can give them, gives them that little push, that little edge, that kind word, and that little bit of money will make them come out of it and be successful again for our community and here to serve us, because that's what they are. They're our servants. We serve them, they serve us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else in the council? Vice Mayor Hannon?
Thank you, Mayor. Excellent report, as always. We had the opportunity to do a ribbon cutting last week at a brand new business in the city of Newark, Vector Laboratories. And in chatting with them, they had a number of options, both on this side of the bay and that side of the bay, and they chose Newark. And it's really due to the hard work of our economic development team that I think closed that deal. So thank you for that. 70 to 80 jobs, and it's good for our community. Just a couple questions and comments. 19 businesses were closed. That's a shame. When you close a business, it's not like you close the business and now are debt-free. People close businesses and they still carry debt. So even though they've dealt with the trauma of losing a business, they still need to figure out how to pay that debt. I would hope that we continue to stay in contact with those 19 businesses so that we can help them navigate how they're going to accomplish maybe paying that remaining debt that may still be on their business books. The 2021 grant results that you showed, again, disturbing in terms of the high percentages of folks that had to deal with some real difficult issues. I'd love to see a chart maybe 6 months from now revisiting those folks, the 82, just to see hopefully those percentages have changed significantly and they're hopefully on the rebound to success. A couple comments and questions. EBEDA, that acronym, the money that we're getting from, I guess, the state of California, is that money that we've already received, or is that money that will be available to businesses to apply for on a grant basis? Didn't understand that.
Let me clarify that. The East Bay EDA is an association of economic development agencies that serves Contra Costa and Contra Costa and Alameda counties. They will receive the money. In fact, the money has already been designated for them. Then they will run the programs through their umbrella organization. We will be recipients of services, but not money. So we participated with them to make the application, but we will be a beneficiary rather than an administrator of the program.
I was really pleased to see in your staff report that we're going to partner with the Chamber of Commerce here in Newark, and I know that they're going to be receiving some funding that's going to help us deliver services to our business community. So I was really pleased to see that. The more that we can champion with our Newark Chamber of Commerce, I think that's best for our community. Retail spaces that are currently vacant, I got to believe that, and I'm looking for your opinion, I have to believe that those pose an impact not only on our community, but on nearby and neighboring businesses in terms of their vacancy. Can you describe briefly your experience in that area, what you're hearing from tenants that are occupying retail space having to deal with next door vacant units?
Yeah. Vacancies are critical for adjacencies. And in the retail industry, the brokers and the tenants and any prospective investor looking at a center watches for what the adjacencies are. To the extent that they are that they stimulate synergy. In other words, the foot traffic to business tenant A supports business tenant B. That is what drives retail. And the makeup of a retail center is to have a large anchor that drives multiple trips a week to that anchor. And then this scattering of smaller supportive retail that thrives because it's in the sphere of the anchor. So whenever you take one of those storefronts, whether it's small or large, away, you interrupt the continuity of retail. The continuity is important, the chemistry of the adjacency is important, and at Newark and Jarvis, the size of those big boxes simply is a vacuum instead of a support to the neighboring retail.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And we have some significantly large retail spaces like Orchard Supply, the old Orchard Supply, the old Mi Pueblo, and other large commercial retail businesses that are vacant and, in my mind, negatively impact those shopping center areas. We, the city, not only need to reach out to the owners of those businesses and see what we can do to help motivate them, but maybe there's some other opportunities for us to look at increasing that motivation moving down the road. The only other question I had was on the industrial space. And in your staff report, I apologize, Mayor, I'm going to pull it up. I was looking for clarification on this comment. On your staff report, you say that Newark is ready to market more land for technology and advanced manufacturing businesses if additional properties have the appropriately designated land uses. So my question there is, I really would like to know, and you don't need to have that answer today, I'd like to know what acreage we have available in our city that is currently available for industrial or manufacturing use that is not being used in that manner, or simply we don't have somebody that's willing to that's coming to develop that land. I want to know kind of what does the big picture look like our total acreage of industrial lands in Newark, and what percentage of that is either underutilized or simply available for folks to use. I was extremely impressed when you talked about 5% of our industrial space is vacant and only 3% of manufacturing. That means we're at capacity. And I'm trying to figure out at the end of the day how much more capacity we have. I'm hoping it's a significant amount, but I'll look forward to that information. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, as well as a lot of people in town, have been most impressed with our economic development programs the last 2 years. I've started referring to you guys as our business task force, all right, which I kind of like. I will ask this. I saw the 19 closed businesses, and I know our last rounds of CARES funding that we put out was really targeted to some of those businesses that were closed the entire time and hadn't gotten a lot of help when we were trying to really target some of them. Were any of them on that 19?
No, that's a great question. The 19 closed before we launched that program, and some of them closed very early in the pandemic. For most of the 19, we can identify what problems they were dealing with as they entered the pandemic. Some of those, 3 of those in the group of 19, received $5,000 grants from the Newark CARES grant in the fall of 2021, but none of them were still open for the second round that you mentioned, Council Member.
I imagine that number would be a lot higher if it wasn't for some of those programs. So 19, as disappointing as it is, I think is quite remarkable that the numbers, that low. You had mentioned some hotel grants that would be available for some of the hospitality folks. Is that through ARPA, or where would those be coming from?
ARPA did quite a bit of funding for hospitality. But the thing that we're watching, the source of funding we're watching now is the money that was allocated from the federal government to the state, and the state is distributing it. The state is not ready to do distribution. We expect those announcements and the NOFAs for that money to come gradually over the course of 2022. That's what we're trying to be ready for. If we do our analysis now, we'll have it ready when it's time to do an application.
So just to be clear, are we expecting to help some of those folks file for the grant, or would the grant come through the city and then they would apply with us?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
We're dependent on what the state does, how it designs its funding.
Okay, they haven't decided yet then. Yeah. And then, just to talk about the low vacancy rate in the manufacturing, which is great. I know recently we also put a moratorium on warehouses and then offered some manufacturing incentives. And it sounds like that's playing a role in this, but maybe anybody on staff could talk about that and if that seems to be working and driving some of that low vacancy rate.
Yes, it's a great question, and it's part of the dots that we need to connect as we think about policy, action, and results in the field. City Council, as you remember, approved, I believe it was in 2017, the ordinance that you mentioned. If that ordinance had not been in place, our ability to enforce advanced manufacturing at the Overton Moore project would be negligible. The fact that that ordinance was in place helped us enforce that. That's critical. You're in a tension point where a developer wants to get a strong tenant. That's important for his bottom line, right? And it's when the city has some of those ordinances and regulations in place that we can hold the line for the long-term interests that belong to this city, right? There was another precursor that was important. Earlier in the past decade, we acted to establish the business technology zoning. That's the zoning that occurs along Gateway, where the Biomed Realty project exists. It occurs at Eureka Square on the far side of the south side of town. Those zonings stipulate that it cannot be a warehouse use, and that helps us a great deal. So that zoning directed the tenancy of the Panattoni-Clariton project that is on Gateway.
It's good to hear some of that is starting to pan out for us. So, and you know, I'll just end with this. I love some of the positive quotes on there. I have run into a few people around town who had nothing but positive things to say as well. And you know, it's one thing for us to put these programs and to maybe open it up, and it's a whole nother thing for us to have boots on the ground and out there in businesses and meeting folks and stuff. So you're both to be commended in the whole team, because really there's some great programs out there that just never get off the ground unless we got good people running them. So thank you to both of you.
Okay, would anybody in the audience like to speak on this item? Anybody? Okay, City Clerk Harrington, are there any requests to speak online?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Then that'll end this item, and this is informational only, so no action. Staff report, Mr. Benu.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, and members of the council. Item F2 is also an informational item. This is related to our upcoming 2022 through 2024 capital improvement plan. Staff report is being provided by our Assistant City Engineer, Mr. Jason Imai. During tonight's presentation, Mr. Imai will summarize the projects that were submitted for consideration, discuss the prioritization criteria for project selection, and provide an overview of available funding sources. We will return at a future council meeting in May to have a more definitive discussion on use of the capital funds. I thank Mr. Imai for his work in this on the CIP. This is the first time that he is solely in charge of the CIP, and I thank him for his efforts. He's going to need a moment or two to hook up his laptop and project onto the screen. And at that point, we can go ahead and begin the presentation.
All right, are we ready? Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. The purpose of tonight's informational item is to provide the council with an initial look at the projects that have been submitted for consideration as part of the upcoming 2022-2024 Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP, and provide council with an opportunity to add any projects to this list you would also like to be considered. Tonight's initial presentation of the 2022-2024 CIP will provide an overview of the capital improvement plan process, review CIP project selection methodology, provide a summary of the various funding sources, review the CIP projects submitted for consideration, and finally go over the next steps. Now, we would like this to be an open discussion, so please feel free to stop me along the way to ask questions, but I will also be pausing occasionally to ask if there are any questions from the council. Now, the purpose of the CIP for each biennial budget is to identify and prioritize capital improvement projects for potential funding. The types of projects in the CIP can include street, park, and building construction, maintenance of existing facilities, feasibility studies and master plans, and new equipment purchases. In general, projects and purchases that involve expenditures of $5,000 or more are included in the CIP. Exceptions to that include equipment that is replaced through the city's Equipment Replacement Fund. Now, the schedule of the CIP process began with a call for projects, which was distributed to all city departments in November. This was followed by an initial evaluation by staff of all projects received through the call for projects process. Tonight is step 3, with council's first look at the projects submitted for consideration. Next, the executive team will rank the projects submitted and review the draft CIP document which would then be presented to council for a review in late April, and will include the list of projects recommended for funding. A general plan conformity finding is required for the CIP, so we plan to bring the draft CIP document to the Planning Commission in early May, followed by a biannual budget and CIP City Council work session. And lastly, we plan to present the final biannual budget and CIP to council for formal approval in late May or early June. Next, I will briefly review the methodology used to select projects for inclusion in the CIP. The CIP project selection first involves an evaluation of each project against the critical issues contained in the city's strategic plan. Now, as a reminder, these critical issues include public safety services, education, quality of life, community development, and city government operations. Each project included in the CIP should align with or address one or more of these critical issues. Now, next, projects are assigned one of three priority levels. Priority level 1 projects are considered mandatory in order to either meet federal, state, local, or regulatory obligations, satisfy a critical risk management issue to ensure public safety, or serve to preserve or protect an existing city asset. Now, priority level 2 projects are considered necessary but not mandatory, as they do not address a critical legal, safety, or asset preservation need, and may be funded by a simple council consensus priority. Examples of priority level 2 projects include local matches needed to secure outside funding, projects which result in a service level increase, feasibility studies or master plans, or projects that represent the final phase of a multi-phase project. Now, priority level 3 projects are basically all other projects and are desirable, but do not satisfy either level 1 or level 2 criteria. Now, after projects are assigned a priority level, they are then evaluated against available funding sources and finally reviewed for the level of staffing or maintenance that would be required. Now, before I go on, I will pause at this time to ask if there are any questions regarding the overall process.
Vice Mayor Hannon?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to ask questions as we go through the report. It's helpful. The call for projects, and in the past, the City Council has seen a list of the unfunded projects. I don't know if staff was able to or did distribute a listing of the unfunded projects for council review in preparation for this item. Do you know if that was done?
The list of unfunded projects was included in the initial call for projects that was sent out to the executive team and therefore all city departments. I believe the call for projects was distributed to City Council through a memo.
The reason I mention that is I personally don't remember seeing that, not to say I didn't receive it, because I think it's important as we look at prioritization of the projects that council is, as we're doing this evening, given an opportunity to weigh in as to these are the projects that staff has identified as priorities. It would certainly be helpful, I think, if the council had the same opportunity to advise staff that we looked at the projects that are either being proposed or that are currently on the unfunded projects list, and we'd like to maybe see staff evaluate one or two or whatever number of projects that are currently there and or that have been there to see if they warrant funding. Thank you for that comment, opportunity.
Okay. We will certainly make a more concerted effort to get that list in the hands of council next call for projects. But we can certainly give you that list after this meeting tonight too. All right. If there's no other questions, on to project funding. Now, the major funding sources for the 2022-2024 CIP can be broken down into 4 general categories. First up is gas tax funds, which includes all direct local distribution funds from the state and the Alameda County Transportation Commission. Typically, this type of funding can only be used for transportation projects within the public right-of-way. Well, we are currently projecting about $8.4 billion of available gas tax funds over the 2-year CIP period. Next, we have capital funds. In short, staff anticipates that there will be sufficient funds in the Measure GG and unallocated fund accounts to sufficiently fund the final list of recommended capital fund projects. And we'll go over that in more detail a little later in the presentation. Next up are park impact fees, which can be used specifically for new park improvement projects. The city's balance of park impact fees currently stands at over $3.6 million. And lastly, we have various other outside funding sources, which include transportation and other grant funds. We'll start by going over what is collectively and commonly referred to as gas tax funds. First, revenues collected by the state from excise and sales taxes on gasoline and diesel fuel, as well as registration taxes on motor vehicles, are distributed to the local cities through the Highway Users Tax Account, or HUTA. In 2017, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 1, or SB 1, which increased gasoline excise taxes, diesel fuel sales taxes, and vehicle registration fees, with the additional revenue allocated to the local cities through the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Account, or RMRA. And collectively, recent forecasts project that Newark will receive over $2.5 million per year from these two accounts. Next, in 2000, Alameda County voters approved Measure B, the half-cent sales tax to help deliver essential transportation improvements within the county. Then in 2014, voters approved Measure BB, authorizing an extension and additional half-cent augmentation of the Measure B sales tax. Now later this month, on March 31st to be exact, the original Measure B program is actually scheduled to sunset. Concurrently, on April 1st, Measure BB will become a full 1 cent sales tax to compensate for the loss of the Measure B half-cent sales tax. Now, over half of all revenues generated from Measure B and BB are distributed to cities as direct local distributions to be used specifically towards capital or maintenance projects that either improve local streets and roads or directly address bicycle and pedestrian access and safety. Now, based on projections recently released by the Alameda County Transportation Commission, we can expect approximately $1.3 million per year of direct local distributions from Measure BB over the 2-year CIP period. Now, in 2010, Alameda County voters also approved Measure F, the Vehicle Registration Fee, or VRF program, which collects $10 from each vehicle registration to be used towards transportation improvements within the county. Now, similar to Measure BB, direct local distributions are made from the VRF program to the local cities. And based on the latest projections, we can expect approximately $195,000 per year from the VRF program over the next 2 years. Oops, too fast. Overall, staff anticipates receiving over $4 million per year in gas tax funds, or a total of over $8.4 million over the 2-year CIP. Next are capital funds. Now, in general, capital funds are derived from budget surpluses and various development impact fees. Now, after successful completion of the Newark Civic Center and a complex exercise to reconcile expenditures associated with the Civic Center project, staff anticipates that the capital fund will be depleted. However, staff also anticipates being able to transfer a sufficient amount of funds from Measure GG and unallocated reserves to the capital fund to adequately fund all capital projects recommended for inclusion in the 2022-2024 CIP. Now, the anticipated transfer into the capital fund will be primarily from Measure GG reserves. As mentioned, staff is currently working on the final reconciliation of the Civic Center budget. And once completed, staff will come back to council at a future date to discuss potential uses of the remaining Measure G reserves towards other capital facilities. Next are park impact fees. Now, 2 years ago, after the successful completion of the Mel Nunes Sports Field Park Synthetic Turf Fields and Skate Park project, shown here, the city's balance of collected park impact fees was nearly depleted. However, I am happy to report that just 2 years later, the balance of available park impact fees has grown to over $3.6 million. Now, the speed and level to which the park impact fee balance was replenished is a direct result of the number of residential building permits that were processed, approved, and issued over the past 2 years. So I would like to take this opportunity to recognize Public Works Department staff responsible for the processing of the permit applications, specifically Senior Civil Engineer Ms. Diana Kenkel, who single-handedly oversees all private development review for the engineering division, and Chief Building Official, Mr. Matthew Farrell, and his building division permit staff for their tireless effort and hard work to respond to and sustain the continuously high level of residential development in the city of Newark. So last, we have other outside funding sources. Now, under transportation grant funds, the city is allocated approximately $40,000 per year of Transportation Development Act, or TDA Article 3 funds, which are exclusively for pedestrian and bicycle facility improvements. The Transportation Fund for Clean Air, or TFCA, is managed by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. The city currently has about $450,000 available for use on projects that would result in a reduction in motor vehicle emissions, such as projects which encourage alternative modes of transportation or address vehicular traffic congestion. Now, in addition to the Measure BB direct local distributions discussed earlier, the Alameda County Transportation Commission does also make available discretionary or competitive Measure BB funds to use towards selected transportation improvement projects. As an example, Newark was recently awarded $323,000 of discretionary Measure BB funds for the upcoming Cherry Street Class 4 separated bikeway project, anticipated to begin construction later this summer. Now, the One Bay Area Grant, or OBAG, is on its third cycle and is managed by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC. Through the OBAG program, MTC distributes federal transportation funding to projects that improve safety and spur economic development in the region's priority development areas, or PDAs. Oops, there you go. There you go. You were looking for the next hexagon, weren't you? I bet you were. So the Alameda County Transportation Commission anticipates releasing a call for projects for OBAG 3 and discretionary Measure BB funding through its 2024 Capital Investment Plan in May of this year. Now, staff will come back to council at a later date with a list of recommended projects that would be resubmitted in response to ACT's call for projects. As for other grant funds, as noted in item D7 of tonight's agenda, Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, jurisdictional improvement funds are available annually for qualified projects and will be used again towards citywide ADA compliance. And finally, there are various other state grant funds that are made available on occasion. The engineering division continuously monitors these programs for any potential grant opportunities that we may be in good position to compete for. And with that, I'll pause here for any questions on potential funding sources.
Questions, anybody? Councilmember Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real quick, because I want to be clear with what we just said. Staff is going to recommend a transfer from the GG fund into our general fund to fund, or into our capital improvement fund to fund other capital projects? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
So just off the top, I'm going to tell you, I am not comfortable with that. We worked hard to get GG passed. We made it very clear that it was for the funding of a new civic center, library, and police station. I think any revenue above and beyond what we planned on for that should either go into paying those loans back or be held back into a reserve where it can gain interest for when we have maybe some more leaner years, because I think it's fair to say that those are probably coming, and that wouldn't exactly be the use that we committed to when we went to the voters and asked them to support that half-cent sales tax. And, it's already a 30-year sales tax. So my feeling is we get this thing paid off and then we sunset it. Tax is already above 10% here in Newark. I think a half cent going away sooner than it was planned would be a good thing. And, we knocked doors. This council knocked doors all over town and looked people straight in the eyes and told them that that's what we were going to use that funding for. And I am not comfortable having it diverted to other projects.
Sure. We'd be happy to do some financial analysis when we come back and discuss these projects further. Tonight's presentation is a review of the projects that were submitted by staff related to this upcoming capital improvement plan, biennial budget. But in the meantime, sure, be happy to do that analysis and see what savings the city would potentially receive as a result of what you're proposing, and we can certainly have that discussion in May. Be happy to provide that research at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hannan, Vice Mayor Hannan.
Thank you, Mayor. Outstanding information regarding the park impact fees. That's really, truly important information. The only thing I would request is when you come back with additional information in this particular item, could you kind of forecast where you think those funds might be, maybe 3 years, 5 years from now? So as we look at park opportunities, park improvement opportunities, we know kind of what the longer term picture might look like, so that we may look at funding something a little later that might provide more value to our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, continue on, Jason.
All right. Next, we'll go over all the projects that were submitted for consideration as part of the budget cycle. To facilitate tonight's discussion, all CIP projects submitted for consideration have been separated into different categories based on the nature of the projects and the type of funding that would be used. First, we'll go over projects that would be funded through gas tax revenue. This first table lists the city's annual street maintenance projects. Standalone transportation improvement projects that would also be funded through gas tax revenue will be covered on the next slide. Now, the street maintenance projects listed here are performed each year and are essential to maintaining the city's roadway infrastructure. Well, first on the list is the city's asphalt concrete overlay program, which includes our asphalt concrete overlay project, slurry seal project, and roadway patch paving projects. Now, although the list of streets for next year's pavement projects is still being finalized, with the attention over the past 2 years focused on arterials and primary collector roads like Thornton Avenue, the goal would be to have the 2023 overlay project address primarily local neighborhood streets. The second is the city's curb, gutter, and sidewalk replacement project, which responds to resident requests to repair damaged or uplifted concrete along city streets. Next, the street tree maintenance program is an important safety project in the city, trimming, pruning, removing, and replacing trees as needed along our city streets. Fourth is the citywide accessible pedestrian ramp project. All of these intersections in the city do have curb ramps at each corner. However, due to the ongoing updates to 80-day requirements, some of those ramps do need to be brought up to current design standards. Now, following is the city's traffic calming project, which performs evaluations and installs traffic calming measures such as speed bumps on streets for which residents have expressed concerns involving excessive vehicle speeds and which qualify under the city's traffic calming policy. Now, lastly, the city's annual thermoplastic street striping project replaces or installs new pavement striping and markings on roadway locations outside the limit of our annual pavement maintenance projects. The total preliminary budget for all of our annual street maintenance projects is just under $5 million for the 2-year CIP. Now, as mentioned, next up are the street improvement projects that will be funded through gas tax revenue. These differ from the annual maintenance projects in that they are standalone, one-time roadway improvement projects. Now, the first project involves improvements to the landscape medians along some of the city's major arterials, including Maury Avenue, Cherry Street, and Cedar Boulevard. Now, improvements would include landscape and irrigation improvements, as well as potential replacement of the city's gateway monument signs. Now, the second and third projects are the design and construction phases, respectively, for a similar landscape project focusing specifically on Central Avenue between Filbert Street and Willow Street as the gateway to the city's manufacturing and industrial district. Now, improvements would include landscape and irrigation improvements within the existing medians and adjacent to the Alameda County Flood Control Channel, and sidewalk improvements where pedestrian facilities are currently not provided. Next on this list is another landscape improvement project. This one would specifically address landscape and irrigation improvements within the state right-of-way at the Thornton Avenue interchange on Interstate 880. I should also note here that engineering staff has also begun conversations with Caltrans to update our freeway maintenance agreement to allow city maintenance staff to more easily enter into and perform needed landscape maintenance within state right-of-way. The next 3 projects are traffic signal interconnect projects on 3 of the city's major arterial corridors: Cherry Street, Newark Boulevard, and Thornton Avenue. The projects would install the necessary infrastructure, hardware and software needed to coordinate the traffic signal timings along these corridors, improving traffic flow during peak periods. And last, but certainly not least, is the Lindsay Track Roadway and Drainage Improvement Project, which is currently in the design phase and budgeted in the CIP. However, based on updated cost estimates, staff anticipates needing an additional $2.4 million to completely fund construction of the improvements. This is in addition to the over $1 million of anticipated revenue that would be realized if the residents of the Lindsay Track neighborhood vote to approve an assessment district to partially fund those improvements. In all, the street improvement projects submitted for consideration total just over $5 million. Now, this slide summarizes the total preliminary cost of all roadway maintenance street improvement projects submitted and compares it to the anticipated amount of gas tax revenue for the next 2 years. With annual street maintenance projects totaling a little under $5 million and standalone street improvement projects totaling just over $5 million, the total cost of all roadway projects submitted comes to a little under $10 million. In comparison, and as mentioned earlier, based on current projections, Newark can anticipate a little over $4 million of gas tax funds during each of the next 2 years, for a total of approximately $8.4 million over the 2-year CIP. And I'll pause again at this time to see if there are any questions on the submitted gas tax funded projects.
Vice Mayor Hannan?
Yes, thank you for mentioning the area on Central Avenue where those improvements were going to occur. That's appreciated. When you look at resurfacing or repaving Thornton Avenue, a significant arterial road through our community, are there additional state, federal dollars that would be available to help offset our costs for those improvements?
Yes, engineering is continuously monitoring state, local, and federal grant funds. We were tentatively identified for receiving some of the transportation bill, infrastructure bill funds that recently passed. However, those earmarks fortunately fell through. So we were anticipating getting money for that, but unfortunately that won't happen. There are another round of federal grant funds opportunities coming up. We have OBAG 3, so we're continuously looking for federal funding, as well as Measure B, the discretionary Measure B as well.
I appreciate the effort. Thank you, Mayor.
Go on.
Oh, okay. Good. So next, we'll go over the different capital fund projects submitted for funding. Now, first, we have maintenance projects. The first 6 projects on the list involve various improvements and replacement of equipment at the Maintenance Service Center on Filbert Street. These include replacement of the underground fuel tanks to comply with state water board requirements, construction of a new security wall adjacent to the railroad tracks, replacement of existing skylights, generator, and tire changer, and the installation of a new security camera system. Now, the next 2 projects would replace equipment at Fire Station number 27 on Maury Avenue and Fire Station number 29 on Russian Drive. The last 3 projects on the list involve tree maintenance and replacement of equipment at city parks. The citywide tree pruning and removal project would establish a comprehensive program focused on the pruning and potential removal of higher risk trees in parks and city-owned properties. The next project would replace the submersible pump servicing the well at Newark Community Park. Currently, the pump is not operational, forcing the city to rely on water from the Alameda County Water District for irrigation. And lastly, the city has been without a playground surface material replacement program for 2 years. All existing playground fall zones would be treated with new impact attenuating material such as engineered wood fiber. In total, the preliminary cost of all capital fund maintenance projects submitted is a little over $2 million. Next, we have requests for the purchase of new city vehicles, the cost of which would be covered by the capital fund. The first 3 requests are from our Public Works Maintenance Division. And in response to the bicycle facility improvements, such as the upcoming Cherry Street Class 4 separated bikeway project, a smaller street sweeper will be required to fit between the narrow space created between the concrete curb at the edge of the roadway and the new delineator posts that are frequently used to provide better physical separation between bicyclists and vehicles. The purchase of a new dump truck and a tractor-pulled top dressing implement used for the application of various landscape material have also been requested. Next is a request for a new fire department pumper engine at a cost of approximately $950,000. Now, the average lifespan of frontline pumper trucks is about 10 years, and one of Newark's 2 pumper engines has been in service for over 15 years. However, instead of including the purchase of the pumper engine in the CIP, staff will instead recommend moving the purchase to the equipment replacement list, where the purchase could instead be financed over a multi-year period. Next, we have a request from police for a new Polaris all-terrain utility vehicle. And lastly, Recreation and Community Services is requesting a new mobile recreation van, which would make recreation opportunities more accessible to residents by bringing pop-up style events into the various neighborhood communities. The total cost of all new vehicle requests, minus the cost of the replacement pumper engine, is about $450,000. Now, next are requests to fund various city operation projects through the capital fund. The first 3 requests on this list come from the police department and include purchases of a 3D laser scanner for crime and collision scene investigations, a risk management software program used to track use of force, and handheld radios for police volunteers. Now, the last 4 requests come from the Recreation and Community Services Department. The first is a UV sanitation system for the Aquatic Center natatorium to disinfect the pools. The second is a Ninja Cross obstacle course system that would also be installed at the Aquatic Center natatorium. Next is renovation and replacement of the play structure, rubberized playground surfacing, and seating area for the Silliman Preschool Center. And lastly is the purchase of a portable outdoor movie system for special events, as the city currently relies on outside vendors to provide similar equipment. Now, the total cost of all new operational requests is approximately $1.1 million. Now, this next slide lists capital fund projects that were resubmitted by staff for consideration after not being selected for funding during previous CIP cycles, primarily due to lack of sufficient funding. However, before we continue, I must first apologize. Actually, after review and analysis of the projects originally resubmitted for further consideration, it was discovered that some of the projects were in fact funded during previous CIP cycles. So instead, this table reflects the updated list of projects resubmitted by staff for consideration. Again, the projects were resubmitted by staff for consideration after not being selected for funding during previous CIP cycles. Again, I apologize for the oversight and any confusion that may be caused. Now, the first project is the replacement of the city's fuel management system used to control access and track usage of fuel supplied through the pump stations at the service yard. The next 3 projects involve maintenance of facilities at the service center yard, including addressing State Water Control Board clean water requirements associated with the fuel pump island, and upgrades to the solid and green waste collection systems. The last project on the list is phase 2 of a Geographic Information Systems, or GIS project, originally funded back in 1998. Now, Newark is a member of the Southern Alameda County GIS Authority with the City of Fremont, Union Sanitary District, and the Alameda County Water District. Phase 1 of the project funded hardware, software, and professional services associated with the authority's GIS database and interface systems. Phase 2 would fund necessary hardware and software upgrades, as well as provide GIS training for city staff from multiple departments. Now, in total, the updated preliminary cost of all capital projects resubmitted for consideration with the 2022-2024 CIP is approximately $720,000. Now, facilities maintenance projects, the acquisition of new vehicles, and operational projects are all funded with the use of capital funds. The total cost of all capital fund projects submitted or resubmitted for consideration with the 2022-2024 CIP is approximately $4.4 million. Now, in addition, after reconciliation and closeout of the Civic Center project, there will be approximately $5.9 million of capital funds that remain committed to other capital projects. Staff is also recommending maintaining a $2 million reserve fund balance in the CIP, bringing the total cost of capital funds needed to approximately $12.3 million. Now, as discussed earlier, staff does anticipate that sufficient funds in the Measure GG reserve and unallocated reserve fund would be available to establish the $12.3 million capital fund balance that would be needed if all projects submitted for consideration were selected for funding. And as also mentioned earlier, staff is currently working on the final reconciliation of the Civic Center budget. And once completed, as City Manager Benoon mentioned, staff will come back to council at a future date to discuss potential uses of the remaining Measure GG reserves towards other city facility projects. Now, I'll pause here for any questions council may have on capital fund projects.
I have one question for you, and that is when this presentation started, we talked about the a scale of 1, 2, and 3 for the mandatory, desirable, and necessary.
Right.
And so where do all of these items fit in that scale?
That will happen in next steps. So tonight's presentation is an informational presentation just to present to council every single project that was submitted for consideration. These projects haven't been vetted yet or assigned the priority level. That will happen at the next step. And when we come back to council with the draft CIP document, each of the projects that are recommended for funding will indicate whether they're level 1, level 2, or level 3.
Okay. Councilmember Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment on a couple items. One, the pumper truck. A few years back, we actually partnered with Alameda County Fire on the Quince truck purchase, and they were able to find some grants, and we were able to get that Quince truck for $100,000 as long as we promised to take the other one out of service. So I would, hope that we're working with fire and seeing if there's any grants available that we might qualify for again on that front. And then just quickly, because there were some small things on there that I saw, like an inflatable screen, and it reminded me. It's funny.
I guess council did have input.
I guess.
And the RV.
An item that came up recently, and I'm not sure if it should have been requested by Recreation or who, because everybody would use it, but we talked about a portable stage after the Christmas tree lighting event and several other events we've had recently. The rental cost alone for a few events throughout the year is more than it would be to purchase it. And it's a small thing, but it would save us some money, and hopefully we can find some room for it on this list. And I'm not sure which department would actually have to claim that, but it would be nice to see it on here.
Recreation.
So, thank you.
Your Honor.
Councilmember Collazo?
Thank you. I was wondering, when was the last time we bought a new street sweeper?
That I do not know. I'm being indicated about 3 years ago was the last time we bought a new street sweeper.
So do we need to replace this one, or is it so that we can have more service to our community?
No, this one is needed because as we move forward with our bicycle improvements, our bicycle facility improvements, a lot of the new improvements, the Class 4 improvements, which are called quality bicycle facilities, require the installation of the delineators, the flexible posts. You see a lot of them, I'm sorry to say it, but you see a lot of them in Fremont. But it is a standard feature now. It is a standard feature now throughout the entire Bay Area and, in fact, the entire country. But that's the closest example that you have of it. So when you put those delineators in, the space between the delineators and the curb, it's narrower. And a normal street sweeper cannot fit through there. So many cities like Fremont, like other cities in the East Bay, have been buying smaller sweepers. And it is something that the Active Transportation Community has discussed. But it's a required cost in order to provide these quality bicycle facilities to our residents.
So on streets where we have those bumpers dividing, we'll use the smaller one, and on the regular streets where there's no bumpers, we'll use the bigger.
That's correct, or I guess you could use the smaller one. It depends on workforce setup. But the intent would be for the smaller sweeper to sweep those streets in which you have the Class 4 bike lanes with the delineators in the lane.
I had to ask because I thought, we just bought one not too long ago. Oh, my goodness. Thank you.
So along those lines, will this street sweeper be able to pick up pine needles?
I would hope so. We can check on that. Should be,
please
though.
do,
I would think
because
so.
My vote's going to be based on this thing configured a finding.
I will make a note of that, and I will indicate to you whether it can or cannot.
Among pine needles are pine cones.
Real quick, Mayor.
No pine needles, no sweeper.
Vice Mayor Hannan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I want to follow up on the mayor's comment because I absolutely agree with him. I think even though you're bringing a draft to us of staff identified projects, it would be helpful if you at least gave an initial look as to which ones qualify as mandatory, necessary, and desirable. I think that's helpful for the council to know. I'm also interested in the future discussion on the budget for capital projects. I understand your graph here, which shows $12.3 million, but I really want to know what the total amount that could be available for this council to look at in terms of other projects that may be, again, on that unfunded projects list. And as Mr. Bucci mentioned, are there opportunities for council to add additional projects, like he mentioned, the temporary stage? So I'll be interested to see kind of that budget discussion item moving forward, so I have a real full understanding as to what is our financial capacity on projects. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, continue.
All right. Moving on to park improvement projects. Now, this table summarizes the park improvement projects submitted for consideration with the 2022-2024 CIP. Now, the first project is a request to install additional netting at the Mel Nunes Sports Field Park synthetic turf soccer fields. The second project comes at a request of a Newark resident to install restrooms at Lakeshore Park at an estimated cost of $350,000. The installation of restrooms at Lakeshore Park was submitted for consideration during the previous CIP cycle, but was not selected for funding, as it was noted that the project is ranked in the Citywide Parks Master Plan as a priority level 6 project, with priority level 1 projects assigned the highest priority. And the last project is a request from the residents at the Sanctuary Village residential subdivision at the corner of Cherry Street and Stevenson Boulevard for the installation of new park improvements at their neighborhood park. Now, Sanctuary Park was not included in the current Citywide Parks Master Plan. Therefore, development of a conceptual park improvement plan or ranking of those improvements against other projects in the Park Master Plan never occurred. Therefore, instead of including it in the 2022-2024 CIP, staff proposes to return to council later this year to recommend amending the Citywide Parks Master Plan to add Sanctuary Park and authorize the development of a conceptual park improvement plan and prioritization analysis based on the recommendations and input from residents and the surrounding communities. Now, total cost of all park improvement projects submitted for consideration as part of the 2022-2024 CIP, minus the Sanctuary Park project, is $400,000. Now, as mentioned earlier, over $3.6 million of park impact fees have been accumulated since the last CIP. That would leave over $3 million left to address other park improvement needs. Now, as I touched on a little earlier, the purpose of the Citywide Parks Master Plan was to create a framework for the future improvement of parks in the city of Newark, providing an implementation plan for our priority projects. Therefore, in addition to the projects submitted for consideration as part of the CIP call for projects, staff recommends identifying projects from the Citywide Parks Master Plan priority list for possible inclusion into the 2022-2024 CIP, with costs to be funded through park impact fee revenue. Now, this table lists some of the highest ranked projects in the Citywide Parks Master Plan. The first is construction of what has been termed Phase 2 improvements at the Mel Nunes Sports Field Park, with Phase 1 being the recently completed synthetic turf fields and skate park. Now, Phase 2 would include the reconstruction and installation of natural grass multi-sport turf fields along the back of the Sullivan Center between the synthetic turf and baseball fields. This project is the only remaining priority level 1 project in the Citywide Parks Master Plan. However, in light of the sustained and significant drought conditions we have been experiencing in the Bay Area over the past several years, staff feels that constructing almost 7 acres of natural grass turf fields may not be the most responsible course of action at this time. Therefore, staff instead proposes to combine the natural turf fields with other identified improvements at Mel Nunes Sports Field Park and focus instead on refining and developing a comprehensive Phase 2 conceptual plan that could then be constructed once drought conditions improve. completing the planned improvements at Newark's premier community recreation facility. These Phase 2 improvements would include construction of a restroom and concession stand, playground, splash pad, and group picnic areas, all listed as priority level 3 and priority level 4 projects in the Citywide Parks Master Plan. Now, next on the list is the installation of sports facilities at Jerry Raber Ash Street Park. These improvements have been assigned priority level 2 in the Citywide Parks Master Plan and include construction of new volleyball court, bocce ball court, and a multi-sport grass field. Now, other priority level 2 and priority level 3 projects not included on this list include improvements at Shirley Sisk Grove and Civic Center Park. Now, improvements planned for Shirley Sisk Grove have been assigned a priority level 2 ranking in the Citywide Parks Master Plan and include a new amphitheater and playground. However, these improvements are scheduled to be constructed by the developer of the new Park Place specific plan and therefore may be removed from consideration for the CIP. As for the identified priority level 3 improvements at Civic Center Park, staff recommends deferring them until the Citywide Facilities Master Plan is completed and recommended uses for the former and adjacent library building have been identified. Now I'll pause here for questions from the council on park improvement projects.
Councilmember Collazo.
Thank you. So if we're adding bocce ball, is it called?
Bocce ball.
Bocce, can we add cornhole to that list, please?
We can look at that.
Okay.
The bocce ball was identified as as a desired improvement in the Parks Master Plan. Cornhole was not, but I'm sure during the development of the conceptual master plan, we can take that into consideration.
Perfect.
We can add that in there for you.
Councilmember Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real quick, we had talked a little bit about updating our park signage. And I'll tell you, a member of Mr. Noon's family asked me when they were going to get something permanent with his name on it instead of that temporary one. And I'm not sure if it would fall under parks or if it would fall under some other category, but I sure would like to see us kind of get some movement on that and see that hit the list as well. So.
Yeah, that project was actually funded in last year's CIP, but unfortunately it hasn't been started yet. But good point well taken. We will be able to start on a comprehensive sign master plan for the parks. And in particular interest, we share your interest in getting a permanent sign for Mel Noon's sports field park up there instead of the temporary one.
Have we developed an RFP for that?
We have not, but we will do so expediently.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Hannan.
Thank you, Mayor. I absolutely agree with your perspective on the sports field park Phase 2. It doesn't make any sense to put in turf grass when we're dealing with a drought. So I appreciate that comment. You mentioned the Lakeshore Park restroom. You identified that as a priority 6?
Priority 6, priority level 6.
Okay. And the only reason I mention that is, again, I haven't seen the recent or an updated parks projects list. And maybe that was sent to us as well, but there may be some other park projects on there that we, the council, might view as more of a priority than a level 6 restroom. And I think, for example, of the Civic Center Park, because there are no restrooms over at the Civic Center Park that I know of, and correct. I know a lot of kids visit that park, and I imagine they could use the library if it's open, but it would certainly be helpful to have a restroom in that area as well. My other comment is on the dog park, and I know that we had talked about kind of re-sodding or re-turfing that periodically. And as I've been down to the dog park recently, I have seen that area that was grass is really now more dirt, and on rainy days it gets to be muddy. So I don't know what our plan is to re-turf that area or reseed that area on an annual basis, or maybe you could comment on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, so to your previous comment, the list of priority projects is included in the Citywide Parks Master Plan. It is ranked with, it does identify each project and its corresponding priority level. We will certainly be happy to get that to you for a look. As for the dog park comment, the initial plan was to maintain the grass, the turf in a large dog park on an annual basis. I believe they were trying to reseed it or let it rest and hopefully come back. Maybe it sounds like that hasn't been as successful. Alternative would be to resod it. That does cost money rather than reseeding it. It is a problem with grass in dog parks. It's every dog park. Everyone loves the grass, but it's hard to maintain. And that's the reason why, if you go to the dog park, half of it is grass and half of it is DG. So the plan would be to, when the grass portion needs to be resodded or reseeded, we close that off and use the DG portion. So we'll work with our maintenance division to kind of revisit the maintenance schedule on that and see if we can get those grass fields back up.
And feel free, if you believe that there's an alternative material that would be suitable other than grass as we're dealing with drought and everything else, certainly don't hesitate to certainly bring those thoughts back to council because we might be willing to look at an alternative other than just turf grass for dogs.
Correct. Yeah, the decision to use turf or DG or dirt was a pretty extensive conversation when the conceptual plan was being developed. And as you can imagine, the residents had strong input feelings. The dog owners, of course, love grass, but it's hard to maintain. So it's an ongoing issue with all dog parks in every city. So we will certainly come back to you with recommendations if we can't get the grass to come back.
At least he's not suggesting a bathroom at the dog park. Councilmember Bucci.
Thank you. There is a bathroom at the dog park, actually.
The dog park is the bathroom.
Actually, the vice mayor triggered something, a memory, and it's the Lakeshore Bathroom and the fact that it's a level 6. I wonder if when we originally looked at that, we had taken into consideration the fact that everybody's been using that area to relieve themselves without a bathroom there. And that's something that staff has had to deal with and that we've gotten a lot of complaints about. So to me, a bathroom there, especially at the lake, as much as it's used, I feel like it should probably move up that priority list a little bit there and as well as Civic Center Park. So just maybe like us to take a look at that and see if we can't do something to address that ongoing problem out there.
Sure. I think when we come back in May to have a more definitive discussion funds for capital improvement plan, we can certainly take a look at the existing unfunded projects in the parks master plan, see where they're ranked, and if the council has the desire to rearrange those priorities, certainly happy to do that and entertain that discussion at that time and receive direction from the council on which items should be funded at that time. So more than happy to provide that information when we return back in May and have that discussion at that time.
Thank you.
Okay, continue.
If there's no further questions, moving on to next steps.
Questions are now cut off.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, did you have questions? I'm sorry.
No, there's no questions. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. I apologize. You'll have a chance to ask more questions at the end. So moving on to next steps.
I got $5.
Over the next few weeks, the executive team will perform its initial first cut review and ranking of all projects submitted for consideration. This will lead to the development of a single comprehensive CIP list of projects, including those projects recommended for funding and those on the long-term wish list for possible future funding. This list will be distributed to the City Council as well. And when we will then come back to council in late April for an in-depth review of the draft CIP based on the executive team's analysis. In early May, we will present, oops, I'm sorry, I'm not clicking. Sorry about that. In early May, we will present the draft CIP to the Planning Commission for conformance with the general plan. And later in May, the full draft biannual budget and CIP will be presented to the City Council during a work session. And finally, we will present the completed biannual budget and CIP for Council's consideration in late May or early June. And that does complete staff's presentation, and I would be happy, more than happy, to receive any other questions you have at this time.
Okay, before we ask council if any other questions, I'd like to ask if any in the audience would like to speak on this item. Anybody? Okay. Then City Clerk Harrington, any requests to speak online?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, so council comments, questions? Now's the time. Of course, Councilmember Hannon, Vice Mayor Hannon.
He has a very good question right now.
Thank you. I want to I want to reiterate my point. I believe it's important for council to weigh in on unfunded priorities, whether they be in the capital projects or the park master plan. So what I'd like staff to do, if you would please, after the executive team has reviewed and ranked their proposals, if the city council will be given an opportunity to have at least a couple weeks before we meet in April to look at the unfunded capital projects and or the parks master plan projects, and ask staff at that time that whether or not we would like to maybe rank one or two of these items as a top priority, and then have staff do that analysis and then be prepared to have that conversation in late April as well. And then along with that, again, to get a full understanding as to the available capital funding that's available, because I certainly don't want to be recommending a project that's going to cost, several $1 million and we don't have the money to do it. That doesn't make any sense. And then finally, at some point, we need, as a council, with staff's help, to sit down and look at those unfunded projects and take a real close look at which one of these are not likely to be funded. We need to just simply look at those on a periodic basis. And if they're not a priority of the community or the council or staff at some point, maybe we need to, make a hard decision to simply remove it from the list. And it's not based on time, based on really kind of what council and staff view as priorities. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, other questions from the council? Okay, I just have one, and that's that, I did review the list beforehand, and I noticed there's some things on the list that have already been completed, but they're still on the list, and it still has a dollar value on them. So what I'd like to ask is that when you get a finalized list, and you give a copy of it to the council, that you do that in a format that we're able to make our own inputs to it. So that would be either probably Excel.
Okay.
Okay.
Will do.
Okay. No other questions. That was an informational item, so there's no further action required. Let's see. Item G is City Council matters, and we have a resolution to consider reappointments to the Newark Senior Citizens Standing Advisory Committee and the Measure GG Committee. Senior Citizens Standing Advisory Committee members who are seeking 2-year reappointments are Rick Ariano, Sandra Ariano, Stanley Keyser, Elwood Woody Ballard, Olga Bourgeon, and Susan Johnson. Then the Measure GG Oversight Committee members who are seeking 4-year reappointments, Michael Marzano, Elizabeth Macris, and Jacinta Arteaga. And I would recommend the reappointments of those members. And first of all, would anybody in the audience like to speak on this item? Okay. City Clerk Harrington, are there any requests to speak online?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Then,
You need a motion?
well, are there council comments first? Then we'll get a motion.
Just a real thank you, Mayor, to the members of our community that you've mentioned that have served our community year in and year out in these roles that are very to our community. Just to thank them for their continued service.
Okay, great. Okay, so now a motion, and a second.
So moved?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Bucci, seconded by Vice Mayor Hannon. Let's see, this thing doesn't say to vote, so what's going on here? Electronics fails us again. There we go. Well, I got a while. Okay, please vote. Man, if I was this slow, I would, okay. Motion passes 4 ayes and 1 absent. Councilmember Freitas absent.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark approving reappointments to the Senior Citizen Standing Advisory Committee and the Measure GG Oversight Committee.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council member comments are next. We're going to skip that tonight. And no, actually, Vice Mayor Hannon, comments.
Mayor, just want to thank staff for both their presentations tonight, Ann Stedler and Jason. Thank you for those excellent reports. Mr. Benoon, you have an excellent staff. They do outstanding work, and we do appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Councilmember Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to give a quick welcome to our two new team members, Steve and Jason. Welcome to the Newark family. And of course, the big news is tonight, another big congratulations to our newest captain, Jolie Macias, who's going to serve the city well. So big night for us here in Newark, and congratulations to all of them.
Okay, and Councilmember Collazo.
Thank you, Your Honor. And so, I want to congratulate our new captain and our chief. But as we celebrate Women's History Month, I want to congratulate some of the other great women that we have working here in City Hall that sometimes get overlooked and don't get congratulated for the good work that they do. Sheila Harrington, she's there for us every time, every day. Kathy Slafter, Angela Montez, Ann Stadler. My God, I call her and she's there. Etta Rivera, Kristen Lee, Lenka Horvika. I just want to thank you for all the good work that you guys do for our staff, for the council, for our city, for our community, and shop Newark.
Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is closed session. Would, first of all, anybody in the audience like to speak about the closed session tonight? No? Okay. City Clerk Harrington, anybody online to speak?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. So the city council meeting will now recess and go into a closed session for conference with labor negotiators pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54957.6. Agency designated representatives, City Manager Benoon, Assistant City Manager Havorka, and Human Resources Director Solido. Employee groups, the Newark Association of Miscellaneous Employees, the Newark Police Management Association, the Newark Police Association, the Confidential Employee Group, and city officials and the Management, Supervisory, and Professional Employee Group. The meeting is now in recess.